You know, sometimes I come into these podcasts and I have a little bit of a moan, and then someone will say, "Oh, Jack, you're so cynical. I get that it's your character, you know, it's who you play on the internet, but why can't you be a bit more positive about these events?" But today, I feel like, come on, you watched this with me. You sat through this god-awful card with Derek Brunson and Elias as the co-main event. Please join me in just shitting all over this. We'll talk about the good stuff. We'll talk about Will Harris finishing a fight early, which was probably the highlight of the night, and Donald Cerrone beating up Iaquinta. But I feel like if you could just let me have this one, if you could be like, not, "Oh, Jack, you're always moaning," but actually, you know, fair enough. Because this card was hard. And as you'll know, I live in the UK, so a lot of the times I'll watch like a few fights, I'll get a couple of the prelims, and then I'll have to go to bed, and then I'll wake up in the morning and I'll watch the rest of the fights. And while I try not to spoil the fights for myself by seeing what the results were, I do often check Twitter, and then there'll be a load of people talking about how amazing the fights were, or how controversial one stoppage was, or something like that. The worst are when you wake up, you're getting ready to watch the rest of the fights, and you see everyone saying how terrible they are, and you're sitting there going, okay, well, now I've got to sit through all of that. But in keeping with our show format, we'll do some news first. First piece of news, Ali Abdelaziz says, so already, don't trust this, but he claims that Khabib Nurmagomedov is ready to take 3 title fights in the space of 11 months, which is bollocks. You know that's bollocks. And yet everyone was like, "Oh, that'd be great. I'd love to see him do that. Why are they holding him back?" If you win a world title, and you have any degree of pull, you're fighting once a year. Maybe twice if you don't matter enough. The man who beat Conor McGregor is not going to fight 3 times in a year. I mean, if he does, awesome, but he won't. What else happened? Combat Americas leapfrogged over Bellator and won, and Rising. They were like, "Get out of here. We're the next big thing. We're the B show. This is what's happening. We're the only true rival to the UFC because we've signed Tito Ortiz." Yes, the golden boy of Golden Boy is signed with Combat Americas. Combat Americas, really, I only know for sending me shitty press releases about fights that I'm never ever going to watch. They did a press release about their new COO or CEO or whatever, and it was like, "She's taken over the world," and it was this soccer mum wearing an MMA glove, and I just thought of Alima McFarlane's first fight. But yes, people will still pay for Tito Ortiz in 2019, apparently. At least companies will. That dude negotiates a killer deal. The fact that he can get people paying him millions to fight is incredible at this stage. What else is happening? Claudia Gadelha versus Randa Marcus is on. Normally you'd pick Claudia Gadelha, but if that fight goes over 1 round, you know that Claudia Gadelha is going to gas. So that'd be cool if Randa Marcus pulls that off. And then the Lesnar fallout. Brock Lesnar says he's staying retired, which could mean that he just failed a USADA test, and they were like, "Yeah, no, you're not coming back in." And we all just they quietly told him, "It's not happening, Brock. You're now a full-time pro wrestler." So yeah, Brock's retired from MMA, which freed up Daniel Cormier because we've been waiting forever for this. I feel like, certainly it's been the case with me, but I feel like a lot of serious MMA fans who really do not give a shit about Cormier versus Lesnar was sort of tolerating the idea because they wanted to see Daniel Cormier get paid. Stipe versus Cormier too is the most sensible thing to do. You know, you had a champion who was on a really dominant run. The most successive wins as heavyweight champion in UFC history, gets caught with a punch, and then they throw him into the scrap heap of history. You know, so he's done well, managing to inactivity himself into that rematch. But yeah, I mean, I'll watch them again. That sounds great fun. And then Angela Hill, who just fought Esquibel last week. She's stepping in for Felice Herrig, who's torn her ACL, so she's fighting Zhao and Yan, which sounds like it could be a good stand-up fight, which is what Angela Hill has. Anything else interesting happened this week? Oh, I saw I had a look at the One FC, sorry, not One FC, I keep calling them One FC, the One, whatever they are, tournament that they're having, the kickboxing tournament. They've got Yod and Giorgio Petrosian and a couple of other really good guys in there. I don't think Holtzkin's in that one, he's heavier, isn't he? But yeah, no, the tournament bracket is looking nice. I was having a look at it earlier. I've forgotten it now, but they're calling it Enter the Dragon. And I was thinking, can you do that? Because I know, the Bruce Lee family, the Lee family are happy to whore out Bruce's name however people want it. Yet you still can't find that bloody t-shirt with the DJ Bruce Lee on, which is the coolest t-shirt in the world. Every time I see it, I'm like, I'm going to go buy that. And then I can't find it. But they are happy to just whore out his name. But they probably don't own the rights to Enter the Dragon itself. Who knows? We'll probably not find out at any point. But anyway, yeah, One's new tournament looks fun. Shaping up well. Right, let's have a talk about this event then. If you like moaning, settle in. Things didn't start too badly, to be honest. You had Cole Smith versus Mitch Gagnon. Mitch Gagnon, I was quite hot on him after he boxed up Renan Barão. He's doing beautiful up and down combinations going into takedown attempts and things like that. And then Renan Barão pulled it back. I think it was in the third round with an arm triangle. Might have been the second. But Renan Barão looked awful in that fight. That was the first one after the first TJ fight. And he just looked dreadful. And that was one of those weird ones where everyone was going, oh yeah, he's back. And I'm like, no, he just got beat up by this unranked dude. But because he won by finish, that's oh, he's back, dudes. But yeah, Cole Smith, been on my Facebook timeline for a while. I think we're Facebook friends. Maybe his brother is my Facebook friend. But yeah, I see a lot of him. But I didn't know he was debuting this week. And he looked really good. I thought he looked sharp. In and out movement. Looked so much bigger than Gagnon. I mean, Gagnon looked thicker, but this is a sport where height and reach really make a difference. And you were looking at Gagnon and he just couldn't get in at a lot of chances. Did a really nice left hook where he caught Smith on the inside and rocked him. There was a really close arming guillotine that Smith was properly headbanging and freaking out to get out of, and did get out. I was watching this one going, and then he popped out and I was like, oh, okay. So I thought that was pretty fun. The only thing that really annoyed me was Cole Smith's pseudo beard / too big mutton chops. Either have mutton chops or have a beard. He's got a beard that looks like elevator doors closed too fast on him. Bit of a small gripe, but it was a gripe nonetheless. Sort that out, son. As we always say on the Fights Gone By podcast, invest in your hair. Jim Miller, Dustin Poirier, Michael Bisping. I can list dozens of them who've gone from just awful looking to absolute hunk. So it wasn't a bad start to proceedings, and then we went into Arjan Bula versus Juan, I don't know where he's from, so he's American, so Juan Adams, which is not a very 265-pound black man with afro name, but, whatever. Arjan Bula, very close to being a boy early on. Step 1, be Indian and say that your style is Kushti, which is the Indian wrestling style. Billy Robinson wrestled the Great Gamma is the famous one. Incredible wrestler, who did some traveling of the world, competing and stuff like that. I think he was the one who really popularized, the Mace Bell and Indian clubs outside of India. And Bruce Lee was well into him too. He used to do a lot of, I think the Indians call them dans, but like a dive bomb push-up or a judo push-up, you might hear him called. Or a cat push-up, I've heard him called occasionally. Billy Robinson wrestled a Kushti guy back when he was travelling around the world kicking ass. And he said that was the reason, whenever he put his hands on the mat, or used to put his hands on the mat, sadly he passed away a couple of years ago, but he'd say, have your fingers curled in like you're doing the leopard fist or whatever. He said, never have outstretched fingers on the mat. And the reason was because he wrestled a Kushti guy. The Kushti guy went from referee's position, put his head in the back of Robinson's tricep, that Ryan Bader style breakdown, and grabbed his little finger and pulled it straight back. He said he never forgot having his finger basically torn off by this Kushti guy. So yeah, Buller started out strong just by being saying that he was a Kushti guy. And then he started headbutting this dude, and I was like, oh, he's getting close to boy territory. B-tier boy. And then the fight just devolved into shit. But his headbutting was working very well. Every time one Adams came in, he'd just drop his head and then drive it straight up into Adams as he stepped in. But yeah, it just turned into a grindy slog. There was some interesting stuff on the ground, just because you got to see a 300-pound explosive black dude bridge out of the bottom of half guard. Opened his half guard, was like, please leave my half guard, and then Buller wouldn't, so he just bridged and threw him off. But yeah, that fight devolved into unranked heavyweight brawl, which is about what you'd expect. Matt Sales versus Kyle Nelson. This was alright, I thought. I thought Matt Sales looked considerably smaller to my eye, certainly softer, whereas Nelson looked huge and, drained, as in, shredded. But Sales was using a nice shoulder roll, moving his head well, rolling with punches well. The right hand came, he just turned his head with it. It looked like a guy who was really comfortable in the pocket. And of course, the other thing about good head movement is that you can get in on guys, you can get them out of position. You don't need a great takedown if you get someone off balance and give them a shove. Glover Teixeira knocked down or took down Ion Cutelaba by pushing him over. Cutelaba grabbed his head and went for a knee, and he'd been doing it all fight, and Glover Teixeira shoved him and then went to let him back up and then realised, oh wait, no, I was working for the takedown that entire time. I'll take this, thanks, and jumped on top of him. And this happened again in the Sales-Nelson fight. He's slipping punches, Nelson overswings, he comes up, pushes him in the back of the armpit, and Nelson falls over. If you ever if you're familiar with any old traditional martial arts stuff, there's lots of techniques where you get past the opponent and get on the back of their tricep or elbow and give them a shove that way. And, some people reckon that that's where the myth of sending people flying across the room comes from, because you can get dudes stumbling just by breaking their balance, getting underneath their armpit at the right time. Look at Fedor's takedowns of Big Nog. They were basically just weaving his head into the right position and then giving Big Nog a bump in the right direction. But yeah, Nelson got back into it for a little while, and then Sales finally got top position and finished with the arm triangle. Love an arm triangle finish. It is getting to be the most popular submission. Arm triangles generally, because there are two different ways you can get an arm triangle. There's the classic arm triangle, the katagatame, this one, where you do it from the top, and that just happens when their elbows open up, or if you're in mount and you start smashing their face and they put their elbows up, and then you can duck down and start working on it. And then there's the arm triangle in the sense of anaconda or das, and you get those by defending shots. So, there's two different ways you can get to a potential arm triangle finish. So you see a fair few of them compared to other submissions. Nordin Taleb versus Kyle Prepelec. Lots of people asked me to talk about Nordin Taleb. I thought it was good. He did lots of nice kicking, working the... was he the orthodox fighter or the southpaw fighter in this one? Whatever it was the open side double attack, high kick, body kick, inside low kick. He was hitting the shin on a lot of them, and it was just, nasty stuff. That low kick, if you're doing it to the inside of the leg, it's like those Jackie Chan movies where they both kick each other in the shin and they both have to stop and shake their leg out. Prepelec, to my eye, didn't seem to do a lot of interesting stuff. There'd be moments where he'd bite down on his mouthpiece and move in, but a lot of it was double jab, not do anything with it. He'd just try and close the distance and then wouldn't, or he'd get countered. Zahabi versus Morales was uninteresting because Ayman Zahabi's fights, generally, he has trouble getting out of first gear. There's those people who just treat the fight like how you spar. And then there are those people who are maybe a little bit more intense than how you spar. But he's lost 2 in the UFC now, but they were very different fights. The first one, obviously, was that devastating spinning back elbow, and that was almost 2 years ago now. But this one was just sort of slow, It was amazing, because they had, what was it? They said, I was very surprised. They said they had 28 or 23 or something like that. It was 20-something Canadians on the roster, and 11 of them were in action tonight. My reaction to that was, I feel like there should be way more Canadians. I know Canada that Canada isn't as populous as the United States, or it isn't as densely populated. But you got TriStar up there, and that's an amazing team. You'd think he'd be bringing some local talent through. Maybe they need to do a better job with the Conor McGregor straight blast gym style deals, where you bring a load of your lackeys along, who maybe wouldn't get into the UFC otherwise, but they're there now. But then TriStar Gym's fighters there are like Joe Duffy, Joanne Calderwood, people like that who've come from across the world to train with Zahabi and Firas Zahabi, not Ayman Zahabi. Yeah, it's just interesting that there aren't that many Canadians in the UFC, if that stat is to be believed. Macy Chiasson versus Sarah Moras, skipped it. Andrew Sanchez versus... this one was just 2 guys walking at each other, needing more conditioning. Walt Harris versus Sergey Spivak. I actually looked into Spivak before this fight. I was like, well, I'm always up for a heavyweight prospect. Maybe one will come through who is incredible. First, Jesus, he's got a tattoo of a bear with a cage on the background over his right nipple. He also looks sort of inbred. But I'd watched his fights, and it was very much regional heavyweight stuff. His last fight against Tony Lopez, who looks like Jorge Masvidal's sad old uncle. I think he was 40. He's got a 61-28 record. Bloody hell. And Spivak was beating the shit out of him. And I watched him beat the shit out. Actually, he didn't really beat the shit out of Travis Fulton. He got on top of Travis Fulton, and Travis Fulton's just like, yeah, well, I've done 300 of these now. Just choke me. Yeah, no, really not that impressed. He throws a good fast right hand into his takedowns, but the next Fedor he ain't, or certainly didn't look to be, and then Walt Harris just overwhelmed him by punching him against his guard, because, if you're a heavyweight, you tend not to learn to, defend yourself. You tend to get on the front foot and win, or get hit and lose. That's just below the top 5 heavyweight rankings 101, really. But props to Harris, he did a good job. And I always confuse him with Justin Willis, who is a little bit more of a cocky kind of guy. Was it Walt Harris who did the drugs, or Justin Willis? I can never remember. Merab Dvalishvili versus Brad Katona. Brad Katona is Jake Mace if Jake Mace did real martial arts. Have a look at the two of them side by side, and you'll see what I mean. But my goodness, Dvalishvili cannot strike for shit. They put an amazing clip on the MMA Reddit, and it's called like Fighter Feels Out the Controls, and it looks like it genuinely looks like someone's just taken the controller and gone, okay, so what does this do and this do and this do? And, he's doing these flying knees and then stopping himself, punches and then stopping himself. Just terrible. And then he had an actual black afro wig instead of one of those hats at the end. A Propek? What are they called? No, Popek Monster is that guy from KSW. Anyway, dull fight. Takedowns galore. Then you had what for me was the saving grace of the card, Shane Burgos versus Cub Swanson. Love both these lads. Cub Swanson long in the tooth now, on the way down. Shane Burgos, exciting guy. Really, I remembered him sort of stalling, but really it's only been that Cater fight. And that Cater fight, those two guys, I don't think either of them are ranked in the top 15 in the division, but they could as well be. Just killers. Bantamweight, featherweight, lightweight. Just killers everywhere. You could not do the other divisions, and I'd be quite content with whatever card you're putting together. But from the Cater fight, I remembered that Burgos has good head movement and interesting counters and things, does some interesting body work. Swanson, obviously, big banger. Black belt in jiu-jitsu, but doesn't use it unless he gets put on the bottom, and then he starts looking for that single butterfly hook stand-up, which is very cool, but did get him arm triangled against Ricardo Lamas, who does his own version of it and hasn't been arm triangled yet. But yeah, Shane Burgos, I thought it was very interesting because he was a lot taller and longer than Swanson, whereas I don't remember that being the case against Cater and a couple of the other guys he's fought, but it looked very big compared to Swanson. Swanson was trying to come in with those big loopy punches, as he always does. I always like Swanson's left hook into left kick. That's a really nice, awkward combination. If you do like a left hook and you step to your right as you do it, or step up with your right foot as you do it and throw the left kick to the body or the leg. Swanson does that a lot. Very cool stuff. Burgos was kind of like stepping back, so he'd step back on a line into his right stance. So he'd like counter with a jab when Swanson came in. Holloway did it with a check hook a lot against Swanson, but he'd stick the jab in Swanson's eye as Swanson stepped in. Step his left foot behind him so that he shifted back into a right stance, and then he'd throw the right uppercut with like a vertical fist. And that worked really well, time and time again. But when Swanson doubled up on straights, which is obviously very rare for Swanson, he's a very loopy puncher, but he'd double up the right straight and he'd catch Burgos going back into that stance, and it worked well, because obviously if you are stepping back on a line and you're only doing a short step and you're changing stances as you do it, you are making yourself vulnerable for you're working on train tracks. There's a train coming, you've got to step off the tracks to be truly safe. But he was getting Swanson's timing, and Swanson was going so loopy with a lot of his punches, it worked very well. Split decision for Burgos. I mean, I could have seen it going for Swanson. No shame in Cub Swanson losing that one. I don't think it's any secret that he's on the way down now, or slowly winding down. But Shane Burgos looked good. Not world beatery good, but very good. And I'm excited for his next match. I'm trying to think who they could give him next. Part of me wants to just say have him and Calvin Cater fight on every card. Derek Brunson and fucking hell. Derek Brunson and Elias Theodorou. I like Elias as a person. We get on well. He's funny on Twitter. But this fight was dire. Just slow spinning kicks and Derek Brunson being like, I'm measured now. And it was the one fight where you just could have gone, no, run at him. And then by the third round, you're going, just run at him. He's not doing anything to stop you from, there were no clever counterpunches that were catching Derek Brunson on the point of the chin, because he still had his chin up in the air. It was two of the least aesthetically pleasing striking styles I've ever seen. Elias Theodorou's jog around the cage to Showtime kick to the leg. kind of took the biscuit. I mean, he was in front of a home crowd, and they booed him out of the arena. So that's kind of the state of this fight. And they wanted this to be the main event. I have said this before, but I try and avoid talking about Derek Brunson as much as possible because it makes me angry that someone can fight like that and still knock out guys like Lyoto Machida. There you go. Elias Theodorou would be the number one contender for the Bellator middleweight title if he decided to go there. But yeah, I mean, obviously what Elias does is working. And I've seen some of his fights and I've enjoyed other fights, but just very strange. And the takedowns worked well for Brunson, did a big slam in the last round, but it's still, Brunson's not setting up his takedowns at all. And you're thinking, this guy gave Yoel Romero trouble. He genuinely gave Yoel Romero trouble back in the day. But then that's just fighters developing. We say that some fighters just... Who was I talking about the other week? Oh, Jacare. Yeah, no, just set off at a rate of knots. Everything was improving and you're going, good lord, if he keeps improving like this, he'll be unstoppable. And then he just stopped. And it was like a complete package. And that's been the case for like the last few years. Anyway, the main event was Donald Cerrone versus Iaquinta. Everyone's telling me that Donald Cerrone's got the best jab at lightweight or whatever now. Someone clever, who I can't remember, said on my on my Facebook, the best jab in the division always seems to be poking out of the face of Iaquinta. The dude just can't deal with jabs. I have always not been sold on Iaquinta as like a top lightweight because he took years off, and also a lot of his big wins were just the UFC feeding him guys he could eat, he could take out with the right hand. Old guys like Lozon, who I love, but obviously long in the tooth. Diego Sanchez, we all know, long in the tooth. Well, Diego Sanchez is more of like a shambling mess now, but Iaquinta seems like a guy who is incredibly tough, can stop a takedown well, has a good right hand, doesn't have a whole lot else, or any clever setups. He'll slip and throw the counter right hand, but it's always like a wide swing. But that made him like a nightmare matchup for Kevin Lee, and Kevin Lee is the top level guy. So Iaquinta has his way into the upper echelons there. I'm struggling to think of Iaquinta beating a lot of the top lightweights because he's not very adaptable at all. Michael Bisping, I mean, the commentary on this card was just terrible. It was Michael Bisping and some other peon who I can't remember, but it was Michael Bisping and some guy I can't remember who was just dreadful. But they were going like, oh, Iaquinta, you know what he wants to do? He wants to box. He likes to throw them hands. You're like, well, no, really only likes to throw that one hand. His jab was largely ineffectual here. He threw some low kicks, but the one thing everyone knows about Donald Cerrone, and the people who've applied it have won, and the people who haven't, is that he hates pressure and straight hitting. So why are you standing at range with him in a kickboxing match, not throwing kicks, and then throwing overhand rights? Or right hooks, just wide right swings. And barely got to the body. His corner were asking him to get to the body, didn't do anything to the body. I saw maybe 2 knee attempts by Donald Cerrone. The intercepting knee was not an issue. So I don't know why Iaquinta wasn't trying to step in. He just looked really limited in this fight. Donald Cerrone looked great to my eye. I know he's working with Joe Schilling now. That's come together well. He's firing a lot more in I don't know, his combinations just look very sharp in this fight. His jab looked good, but then Iaquinta made Khabib Nurmagomedov's jab look good, which I joked about on Twitter, and everyone was like, oh, I think he'll find. And I was going, oh, I'm actually just joking. If you think either of them is an amazing jabber, maybe reconsider what you think of jabbing. Joe Duffy is in that division. That guy uses a jab well. Dustin Poirier has learned to jab overnight and actually uses it well. But Donald Cerrone was doing good stuff with volume. Iaquinta was just sort of coming in behind his face, and his stance is so strange. He's got his head sticking out, and then his hands, his body's square. He's never like behind a shoulder. He's always square, and his hands are in front of his chest, with his chin sticking out. So when he stepped in, and he wasn't moving his head, Cerrone hit him with a jab, and he ended up falling down. Very, very strange. A fantastic character for memes. Obviously beat Kevin Lee, which is very impressive. But my word, this guy just doesn't have an awful lot to show. At least when he's out of ideas. He might be one of those guys who's very creative when he's kicking ass. And then as soon as something stops working, it's just like, well, keep throwing the right hand, maybe it'll work. Enormously tough, but, Let's talk about what's next for Donald Cerrone then. It's people talking about Khabib. God. I was thinking about the Khabib fight, actually, in the lead up to this, because I did a Filthy Casuals guide to Donald Cerrone. Go check that out. And while I was working on that, I realised I can't remember anyone just holding Donald Cerrone down. I can't remember him just being laid on. He's incredibly active with his guard. He's incredibly solid in his takedown defense. And he's got good knees and elbows out of the clinch, which he uses frequently. Leon Edwards beat him up in the clinch, but that was a different sort of fight, different dynamic of fight. So he was signed to fight Khabib a while ago, and then one of them got injured, and that fight fell through. But it's certainly an interesting thought. I don't think he deserves it. I think when you've got Dustin Poirier and Tony Ferguson sitting there waiting for title shots, you can't be having Donald Cerrone jump in. The Cerrone-McGregor fight makes a ton of sense because, that's an awesome rub on your guy who's going to fight 3-4 times a year, reliably, and says he doesn't want to quit anytime soon, if he wins. He's also stylistically a pretty good matchup for McGregor. Hates pressure, hates straight hitting, can be a little bit chinny, and a slow starter. All those things McGregor's style fits into nicely, and if McGregor knocks him out, great. Bounce him straight into the Khabib fight once Khabib's done fighting Dustin or Tony. That division's so good. There's just not really a lot. There's too much going on, really. And, then you've got Justin Gaethje, who's just sitting in the wings, having knocked out 2 in a row? But good guys. And he was asking for Iaquinta for quite a while. I was hoping for Donald Cerrone versus Barbosa 2 if Donald Cerrone lost this one. Iaquinta versus Barbosa would be good. Iaquinta versus Gaethje feels like a stall for Gaethje, but then no one can keep moving forwards in that division because it's sort of log-jammed. Anyway, what else happened? Oh, there was some Bellator fights. My boy Raymond Daniels, I said just before this, I tweeted out, hey, Raymond Daniels is trying MMA again at the weekend. That's weird. He's 40, and he, his last fight was in 2006 and he lost, so they put him in with an 0-0 guy, which I think fair enough. They got him on the main card. This is what Raymond Daniels can actually do in MMA. Kind of tells you a bit about Bellator kickboxing that they lost Giorgio Petrosian. I'm not seeing a lot about them at the moment. One's putting on all the best kickboxing matches. One's got infinite money because they're not worried about ever making any back, so they can offer Nicky Holzkin, people like that, money. So Glory's really struggling there too. But Raymond Daniels, obviously bored of kickboxing, so they brought him over to MMA, or they wanted him to do MMA. They put him with this lad. Raymond Daniels does some spinny shit, hits a spinning back kick to the body, then spins in on this guy who's obviously terrified of another spin kick coming in. Jumps, lands, throws a punch instead, knocks him flat on his face. Absolutely gorgeous. I called my wife through to watch this fight because I knew Raymond would do something fun. Raymond's always been really fun. But he's not going anywhere in MMA. He's 40 years old. And Coca likes to bring people along super slow. We were excited about Shinzo Machida because he hadn't had a full combat sports career, and he was coming on 40, and then they put him in against James Gallagher finally, and he lost, and now there's just sort of no rebounding from that in time. Raymond Daniels, especially if he progresses at the rate of MVP or someone like that, isn't going to ever get close to a title in MMA, but he might do some interesting knockouts in the meantime. Then Brent Primus go-go-platted a guy in the main event, which was super weird. Not too eventful, but notable for the go-go-platter. And then Fabian Edwards, because they were in England, they got Leon Edwards' brother, who is, I think it was 6-0. They gave him an 11-10 opponent, or an 11-9 opponent, and he knocked him out with an up kick. It was hilarious. The dude stands over his guard, which is, no number one in MMA, of course, gets up kicked in the face, and then just completely turns off. Eats 2 more up kicks, is standing as Edwards stands up and then batters him some more. But that's classic Scotty Coker, Leon Edwards is having to fight killers day by day, and Fabian Edwards, because he signed with Bellator and they want some British talent, he just fights on British cards against nobodies. Nothing will ever sum up that difference more than those two brothers quite nicely. Right, let's do a couple of questions and then we'll piss off until Thursday, I reckon. Hi Jack, Australian boy here. Just wondering what your take on 5-round fights is. I regularly listen to Chael Sonnen, whose podcast is quite good, prattle on about how he believes 5-round fights are just too long. He often points to people like Bobby Whittaker, Yoel, and the amount of times between their fights, both against each other and after the second one, as evidence that 5 rounds is just too long. Personally, I sort of agree, but I do feel it deprived the sport of some all-time great fights, i.e. Hendo vs. Shogun 1, Chael vs. Ando 2, Conor vs. Nate 2, Rory vs. Lawler, Yair vs. Korean Zombie, etc. Just interested in your take. Cheers, Alex. English breakfast tea bless. I'm always for more 5-round fights, if I'm honest. I mean, I would have hated if the whole card on this one was 5-round fights, but I think if you've got 2 top 10 talents in the world fighting each other, 15 minutes is not enough to get it done. Think about, Cerrone versus Lawler, Jacare versus Yoel. Fights of that level and importance, 3 rounds and then a 29-28 decision one way or the other, just doesn't feel right, you know? If you get a split decision in a 5-round fight, it's normally because the fight was like, bloody hell, that was a bit of a back and forth one. If you get a split decision in a 3-round fight, there's 100 ways that can happen. It can be not a very close fight, or it could be a razor close fight. It's just you're playing with like 3 points, basically. 5 rounds gives you more time to work out who's the better man. It gives you more time for a story to develop, from a viewer perspective, for ebbs and flows in combat. The best fight, a lot of the best fights I've seen have been 5-rounders, and a lot of the best 5-rounders I've seen have come in phases. There'll be like a first and a second round where the guy is kicking ass, and then suddenly in the 3rd round something will happen, and he'll be having difficulty through the 3rd and the 4th, and then maybe he'll come back, do enough in the 5th, and you're going like, wow, okay, I reckon he just about pinched it. I think maybe, I don't know, fights feel a little bit longer and more decisive, even at, the same time period, 15 minutes, if you do the first round 10 minutes and then the second round 5 minutes like they used to do in Pride. Maybe that was just in tournaments, I can't remember the exact rules, but 10-minute first round, 5-minute second round, I always feel like that's a better use of 15 minutes than 5-minute round, 5-minute round, 5-minute round. Obviously, I'm not going to argue that it's not incredibly grueling, but, there's been plenty of guys who've done back-to-back 5-round fights and haven't taken huge amounts of time off. Tim Elliott left the UFC, won the Titan FC belt, did 2 5-round fights back-to-back, won all the fights on Tough, fought Demetrius Johnson, all in the space of about a year and a half or something like that. Granted, he was styling all over those guys in those 5-round fights, but he was still training for 5-round fights. He was still getting beaten up in the gym for training for 25 minutes. A lot of that might be to do with star power and belts. Robert Whittaker can afford to take time off now, if he needs to. Once you get that belt, you have a degree of leverage. You can go like, I'm not fighting injured. Whereas if you're, 1-1 in the UFC, they offer you a fight short notice, you might have to take that. They offer you a fight and you're injured, you take that. You get injured in your camp, you have to go through with it because you're 1-1 and they'll cut you. It comes back a lot to, a fighters union again, but, fighters have such a shit deal negotiating with companies anyway. And we didn't even talk about that one stuff last week, but yeah, they're being super shady, as always. Shadier than usual, actually. Trying to make it so that your management has to be approved by them, which basically means, in effect, they will give you 3 or 4 managers who work for them, who will be negotiating your deal with them for you. So they will be negotiating both sides of the deal. But yeah, it comes back to that. Once you've got a belt, you've got leverage. Once you're a star, you've got leverage. Once you lose the belt, or once you've lost a couple of fights, you don't have leverage, and you have to start taking time. You have to start taking fights where you wouldn't normally take them, or you would rather not take them. If you are the champion, or like a big superstar like Yoel Romero, you can say when you want to take fights and not. Ultimately, yeah, it's more grueling, but I think that's what I like about it. Once you get to the top levels, you want decisive finishes, or you want damn good fights. You don't want 3-round decisions which could have gone either way because not a lot happened. Cheers, Alex. What's up, Jack? Can you think of a common denominator that you can point to that allows fighters to effectively translate their original fighting styles, brackets, karate, judo, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, etc., into MMA? In other words, what causes someone like Robert Whittaker to take his karate background, mix in boxing, and lights out takedown defense and become a world champion, and someone like Roger Gracie, arguably the greatest jiu-jitsu practitioner of all time in the gi, to ultimately fizzle out? P.S. I remember a while back when you said you were interested in manga recommendations. Well, I would highly, and I mean highly, recommend Vagabond by Takahiko Inoue. It's a dramatized retelling of the life of Miyamoto Musashi. Oh, there we go. Containing themes about growth and self-improvement, top-notch storytelling, and most beautifully detailed artwork in the history of the medium. Your boy all the way from Minnesota, Abdi. Well, I've read Musashi by A.G. whatever his name is, the lengthy novel, epic novel, whatever it is, the episodic one, and that was good. So yeah, maybe I'll give that a try. Find a scan site and read it that way. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about translating a style into MMA. I think that natural ability and athleticism can work against you in coming to MMA. I think adapting to MMA favors people who can trick their opponent, who can work setups and feints and things like that. And the thinking behind that is the same whether you're striking or wrestling or grappling. You're trying to make one thing chain into another while the opponent's focusing on the first thing, or you're trying to make something look like something else. And those, if you watch Yoel Romero striking, he does a lot of that. He does a lot of inactive stuff, and he is incredibly explosive and athletically gifted. And in fact, people tell me that as a wrestler, he was just all about athleticism. But in MMA, his striking and his takedowns largely have been quite cleverly set up. He'll get guys thinking one thing, go another way. And the same is true of Robert Whittaker. He mixes things very well. Whereas Roger Gracie, everyone knew what he was trying to do. And he tried to add a jab so that he could jab and shoot, but the jab is the longest weapon. And if you're 6'4" and you've got a long old reach, that's a long distance to shoot through against guys like King Mo, who have reacting to double leg attempts down to a natural bodily function. And I think, there's a lot of that moving back towards being a specialist like Damian Maia stuff. But I think Roger Gracie could have developed better as a fighter if he'd gone into striking and gone after it like he wanted to score points and land punches. There's this thing where people get angry if you say score points because they think you're talking about like point fighting, but scoring points is the best way to look at something. Because if you are throwing decent punches, if you score good points on good areas, you should hurt the opponent. Thinking of it as scoring points is what allows you to, trick people and find openings and make it into that game for yourself. If you're thinking about doing damage, you start loading up on punches and worrying about how hard the punch that you land is. Whereas if you're just thinking about scoring points and, scoring points and not getting scored on yourself, the punches will look after themselves and you can, accumulate damage that way. Sugar Ray Robinson used to talk about that. Like, he started trying to knock people out and couldn't get a single knockout and was wondering why he couldn't knock people out anymore. And then he went back to just focusing on boxing, and suddenly the knockouts were just taking care of themselves. But yeah, I think as few principles as there are that are shared between all martial arts, misdirection, feinting, deception, those are the important ones. If you watch and even if you're not going to go into, a different area of mixed martial arts, even if you're going to try and be a specialist like Ben Askren, he's always been a guy who looks for clever ways to do things. If you watch those Askren DVDs, the details he gives out, you're just going, how did you ever come up with that? Obviously, you've put a lot of thought into it because, his teammates and coaches aren't doing the same thing or showing the same thing. The guy is very, very clever and he's given a lot of thought to how he's going to set people up. And then you're just transposing that into MMA. You're not going, I'm going to try and power double leg this guy, but I'm coming from further out and he's not obliged to wrestle me. But that's just my 2 cents on that idea. Cheers, Abdi. Right, if you want to get in on the Patreon, there's some new stuff coming to the Patreon. We'll have an article coming later in the week for Patreon boys. Go ahead and do that because it supports the podcast and lets me do this. If you want to send an email to the podcast, fightsgonebypodcast@gmail.com. If you want to see what I'm doing anytime, there's going to be 2 articles coming this week on the Fight Primer, so go check that out, fightprimer.com. And I wrote a book called Notorious, which you can now buy in Italian, apparently. I'm your boy Jack Slack. Donald Cerrone's dad strength bless.